If you were the only one who knew about the downfall of humanity, what would you do? Hey astronomers, wanna watch a movie? As we begin to enter the campaign season for the Academy Awards, I thought it would be fun to look at a unique genre of film. This genre I'm thinking of is films that are considered to be Oscar bait, or films that are made to win awards. And while this genre of film isn't inherently bad, we're going to be talking about one that was difficult for me to get through. Today we are going to be talking about the 2021 film Don't Look Up. So this film begins with a PhD candidate named Kate Dibiasky, who is the protagonist of this film. She spots what looks to be a comet that is heading towards the Earth, so she calls in her co-worker, Professor Randall, to come and look at it. However, these two soon notice that this comet is actually very dangerous. It's referred to as a planet killer, and it's on a one-way path to Earth. Randall and Kate manage to get in touch with several different higher-up officials, one of them being Dr. Teddy, to try and warn people about this comet hurtling towards Earth. They found that in 6 months' time, if this comet hits Earth, it will wipe out life as we know it. So what Randall, Kate, and Dr. Teddy decide to do is to try and get a meeting with the President Janie Orlean. And these three wait through the night until the next day when they're able to actually talk to her and warn Janie and her chief and staff son Jason about this comet. Despite Randall and Kate being very forthright about the danger that this comet is going to put them in, Janie and Jason just do not care whatsoever, especially since their statistics aren't 100% true, or rather, I guess I should say, it's not entirely certain, but they have enough data to believe that this is going to wipe out life as we know it. And because of this, Janie says that they're not going to alert the public and play up this comet's impact that it's going to have. And that doesn't sit well with Randall or Kate, who both know that this is a very dangerous thing happening. We then see Kate talking to her boyfriend Philip, who we notice very quickly they have a very strained relationship because Kate doesn't like talking to Philip's mother. We also learn in this moment that Randall has a wife named Mindy, and they have 2 adult sons living at home, and they seem to be a just quaint, normal seeming family. We then move away from this to go to a scene in Silicon Valley where there is this big tech company named Bash, and we meet the CEO, Peter. He is unveiling a new product for his company, and this product essentially detects how people are feeling and then works to appeal them as it works like in favor of the company so that they can sell stuff. So it's essentially like reading your emotions and what you're thinking and then selling you stuff based off of what you feel. Anyway, I wanted to pop that scene in here because Peter will come back a little later, but we move back to Randall and Kate, who managed to score this huge interview on like a major television network with TV personalities Bree and Jack. But before they can go on air to break their huge story about the comet, there is a story right before them about pop star Riley, who is played by Ariana Grande, and she's talking about her highly publicized breakup with her boyfriend DJ Cello. And these two have a live chat on air where they reconcile, and DJ Cello proposes to Riley and she accepts. It's a whole moment. And immediately after this story, Randall and Kate then have to go on air and talk about how there is a comet hurtling towards Earth that's going to kill everyone. And Randall is somewhat contained during this interview, but when Kate is faced with both Bree and Jack acting very nonchalant at this and playing it down, she ends up kind of losing her cool and trying to get them to get that sense of urgency of how important it is to listen to them. And this interview quickly spirals into a disaster, which leads to Kate then becoming this internet meme, because the kids these days love their memes. And a lot of it has to do with her doomsday cries, and people are being bummed out by her, whereas Randall gets a lot of attention because he's like super hot apparently. So I love how the internet works. And not long after this interview and bringing to the public the comet that's hurtling towards Earth FBI agents arrest Randall and Kate and bring them to the White House to talk to Janie again. And because Janie is caught up in some controversy right now, what she wants to do is use the comet as a way to divert attention from that controversy and focus the public's attention on that. So she decides that what she's going to do is have this very decorated war hero go out into space with a team out into the Earth's atmosphere and destroy the comet before it can come down to Earth. And as the word of this comet destruction starts to become more imminent and people are kind of becoming more and more aware about the situation, of course that means Randall is going on the news more, which then leads to him having an affair with Bree. So the nation watches as Benedict, who is the war hero, starts to begin his journey to nuke the comet, because that is the American way to handle these things. And there is a moment in the briefing room where everyone's watching this journey, particularly Janie, Randall, Kate, Bree, and Teddy, when suddenly the CEO, Peter, calls Janie out of the room. Moments later, it appears that Benedict and his team are retreating from space and returning back to Earth, having not nuked the comet. After this mission is aborted, Randall and Kate then meet with Janie, and they find out that the reason why Peter called Janie out of the room and why the mission was aborted was because they believe that this comet could contain a lot of minerals and essentially wealth for them to use. Randall and Kate are both mortified by the fact that they're letting the comet strike Earth for the chance to get wealth. And so Randall is absolutely in the trenches of this media circuit and becoming a puppet for this bash company, whereas Kate is trying to continue this anti-comet campaign that she's on. And since Randall is still in the public's favor and he's working with Bash to talk about the comet, people, not just corporations, but like individuals, start to become pro-comet and letting the comet hit the Earth. That's what they want. And it's to the point where even Kate's parents stop talking to her because they are pro-comet, and since Kate is so outspoken about being against the comet, they disown her. So we see Randall and Kate essentially continue on these two story paths, where Randall is still working with Janie's administration, talking about the comet, and having this affair with Bree. Meanwhile, Kate is working in a supermarket because no one respects her as a scientist anymore, and she starts hooking up with this like anti-government dude named Yule. Later, June, who is Randall's wife, confronts him for having an affair with Bree and starts to go in about how they had this like nice family, everything was great, and then he threw it all away for this press and attention. And like she just has this great moment of just being so unapologetically upset at him. And this starts to begin his change of heart, but it gets even furthered when Randall sees that Peter is using drones to scavenge resources from this comet. And this all culminates to him having a breakdown on the Bree and Jack talk show, where he starts criticizing the administration and talking about how the public's reaction to the whole situation with the comet is absolutely insane and that people should be worried about the comet. And because of this meltdown, Randall is obviously excommunicated from this media circus that he's been a part of. Bree dumps him. He's no longer allowed to work for the Janie's administration. And as soon as the comet starts to enter Earth's atmosphere, Randall meets up with Kate again and apologizes to her, and he also meets Yule. And once the rest of the planet becomes very aware that the comet is inside of Earth's atmosphere and there's no stopping it really at this point, there comes a spiral of people trying to capitalize on this moment. There's things from internet challenges to a movie being made about this whole media circus that has happened surrounding the comet. And then Janie starts to go on this campaign with her administration where they directly go against what Randall is saying, spouting the phrase, "Don't look up." and they even have a concert with Riley and DJ Cello where they perform this ballad that is called Just Look Up. So since there is very little time left and no chance of survival, Randall gathers Kate and Yule and his entire family along with Teddy, and they have just one good final meal with family. The drones that were sent to mine the comet end up faltering or getting destroyed, and so Janie and Peter quickly realize that there is very, very little time left for them to escape. Janie calls Randall and tells him that if he wants, he can bring a guest and himself into this plane with cryopods so that they can be frozen and avoid the impact of this comet. But Randall declines, and he wants to stay with his loved ones, even if that means his demise. The comet soon clears Earth's atmosphere and hurtles towards the ground. Randall, along with the rest of his family, sit together and they kind of reflect on their life before the impact of the comet. The comet hits the ground, destroying life as we know it, and then we fast forward to more than 22,000 years later. The survivors of these cryopods arrive at a Earth-like planet, completely in the nude, by the way, and this planet is inhabited by these mutant creatures, and one of them decides to eat Janie, and thus ends Don't Look Up. And like I said in the beginning of this video, this movie, in my opinion, is very much Oscar bait, and I think that it's an interesting movie to look at when we discuss this genre of film. So let's dive into some numbers. The budget for this movie was $75 million, and in box offices, it made $700,000. Now, as we've discussed in the past, we cannot always look at box office performance in order to gauge whether or not a movie is successful. This movie did have a very limited theatrical release before jumping onto Netflix 14 days after it opened in theaters. Something else to mention is this movie came out in December of 2021, so it was still heavily impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. So, since this jumped to Netflix, let's look at those numbers and see if that helps us get a better gauge of how it performed. Don't Look Up was the most streamed English language film on Netflix during that first week of release, with a viewership of 111 million hours. This makes it the second highest viewership for a movie on its debut weekend in Netflix history. And in its second week, it retained its first place position with around 152 million hours of streaming. That number, by the way, is the record for the highest weekly viewership for any Netflix film ever. So clearly, this movie reached a lot of people. But what did they think of it? On IMDb, this movie has a 7.2 out of 10 with over 588,000 reviews and a Metascore of 49. On Rotten Tomatoes, it's got a 78% audience score and it's got a 55% on the tomato meter. A lot of people go back and forth in their reviews as to whether or not the political commentary of this movie was insightful or if it was heavy-handed. But before I fully talk about my thoughts of this movie, I want to talk a little bit about why I believe that this movie is Oscar bait. Like I said in the beginning of this video, Oscar bait is a word that is used to describe a movie that is made strictly for winning awards, specifically Academy Awards. This doesn't always mean that it is a bad movie, but typically it banks more on the star-studded cast and a story that is either relevant to what we are currently experiencing or tugs at the heartstrings a little too hard. And so when it comes to world building, it sort of falls apart. There's a certain line that I feel like all movies in the Oscar bait genre have to go through in order to make it a truly entertaining and captivating story despite the casting, and I feel like most of the time it falls short of that line. Don't Look Up at the 94th annual Academy Awards ceremony was nominated for 4 Oscars. These included Best Picture, Best Original Screenplay, Best Original Score, and Best Film Editing. And I'm not saying that this movie didn't deserve to be nominated for awards, but I think that the reason why this was such an Oscar-baited movie despite the star-studded cast was because it was offering commentary on the climate crisis and Trump administration. And to be clear, I'm not saying that if you have a cast that is almost entirely well-decorated actors or very impactful people in our pop culture, that it is inherently an Oscar bait movie. There's a reason why these actors are so in demand, and I don't think that inherently makes it an Oscar bait movie if those actors are in that movie. Nor am I saying that it's a bad idea to make a movie that highlights things such as the issues in our society, our planet dying, or just general cultural issues. But when a movie is crafted in order to win awards rather than tell a story, it's a little disheartening to see. Now, while watching this movie, I personally had to take several breaks from it. Conceptually, it was not a bad movie, but the timing of the movie was what made it bad, if that makes sense. This film came out in 2021, and since it parodies what the Trump administration was like and the climate crisis and the COVID-19 pandemic even, it was just all too soon for people to properly enjoy this film. And I'm not saying that there's ever a good time for political satire, but something that I saw a lot, and I agree with in the reviews, was it was just a little too soon to be parodying such a serious topic. This film was announced in February of 2020, which was just about a month before the pandemic started to get really bad in America. However, because of the pandemic, it ended up being delayed and released in December of 2021. While the pandemic could not have been predicted for most of us, I think having such a movie come out so close to a volatile point in human history was just a little too much for most viewers to enjoy this film. And trying to remove the context from this, it's interesting to look at this film. There's a lot of things that could have lended itself to making sure that it was successful and making sure that it was a good movie. Firstly, it was written by Adam McKay. And for those of you who don't know, he was a former SNL writer who then started having a rise to fame in the early-ish 2000s because he partnered with Will Ferrell and did movies like Talladega Nights and Anchorman. He has some very successful movies under his belt, so it's interesting to look at this movie and see it's not necessarily a skill issue. And the cast of this film was absolutely stacked. We had people like Jennifer Lawrence, Timothée Chalamet, Leonardo DiCaprio, Meryl Streep, and Kate Blanchett, all in this movie, very talented actors and actresses, and I believe this is no fault of the actors. They did the best they could with the movie and timing and all of that to make the world feel as real as they could. I believe the two big parts of this movie where it falls apart was the timing, and occasionally it felt like a stretched out SNL skit. I think had this movie been broken up and put on SNL, it would have killed. People would have liked it, but sitting down and watching such a satirical film that at times felt like it wasn't even offering an insightful commentary, but rather mocking the situation, it was just not that pleasurable. Had we not been in such a vulnerable point in our history, I believe that this movie might have been received better, but for me, I did not enjoy it that much. Give me 5 years and I might like it a little more. But I'm curious to know what you thought of this movie. If you made it to the end of the video, dude, thank you so much for watching. Like I mentioned, just because a movie is Oscar bait focused does not mean it is necessarily a bad movie, nor would I really call this movie a bad movie. It's just the timing of it was atrocious. It was just such a volatile topic combined with this lack of nuance and chaos that just was such a trip to go on that I was not ready for. A lot of the time it felt like it was playfully jabbing at what was happening and being like, isn't this stupid? Instead of offering any sort of in-depth or insightful commentary on the issues being presented. If you've seen this movie before, I'm very curious to know what you thought of it, and if you haven't seen it, why not watch it? I would recommend watching watching it to form your own opinion. I always say that. I think it's important that we watch movies and TV shows, even if they aren't the best, so that we can talk about it like adults. I'll send a little smooch your way, and I'll see you next time.